The MCU X-Men casting dilemma. The weight of the mutant era. For over a decade, Marvel Studios built the Marvel Cinematic Universe on the backs of the Avengers. But for longtime comic book readers, the true holy grail has always been the X-Men. Bringing mutants into an established, multi-billion-dollar cinematic universe is not merely an expansion, it is a foundational reset. The casting of Charles Xavier's First Class carries more cultural and narrative weight than almost any casting cycle in modern comic book history. That is precisely why the latest casting slate, announced by Kevin Feige at D23, feels so deeply polarizing. When you look at the names attached to this ensemble on paper, Kit Connor as Cyclops, Sadie Sink as Jean Grey, Christopher Abbott as Professor X, Samara Weaving as Emma Frost, Inde Navarrete as Rogue, and Maya Boyd as Storm, the immediate reaction is not pure excitement, it is confusion. The lineup feels disconnected, pulled between competing creative mandates. The desire to cast young, fresh-faced actors to anchor a decade-long franchise, clashing violently with a reliance on legacy stars to ensure box office safety. With one singular, undeniable exception, Adam Driver as Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister, this announced roster represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes the X-Men dynamic function. Part 1. The core foundation. Kit Connor, Sadie Sink, and the misunderstanding of leadership. To understand why this lineup falters, you have to look at the emotional bedrock of the mutant mythos, Scott Summers and Jean Grey. In the comics, Cyclops is not a side character, and he is not a teenage recruit who needs guidance. He is the field commander of the X-Men. He is a tactician burdened with the survival of an entire species, possessing a level of military precision and stoic authority that demands the respect of everyone from Captain America to Magneto. Similarly, Jean Grey is the emotional core and one of the most formidable psionic entities in existence. Casting Kit Connor as Scott and Sadie Sink as Jean, essentially portraying them as collegiate rookies, strips the core team of its narrative authority. The loss of gravitas. When Cyclops is cast as a youthful newcomer with an actor like Connor, his authority feels unearned. Scott Summers works best when he has already endured years of Charles Xavier's training and carries the exhaustion of leadership. The first-class redundancy. We have already seen the cinematic origin story play out twice over the last 25 years. Regressing Scott and Jean to wide-eyed novices forces the narrative backward into training montages and high school-level melodrama, rather than launching them as a capable operational strike force. The dynamic imbalance. Jean Grey's complexity comes from her maturity. Reducing her character to a younger archetype dilutes her presence in political and ideological mutant conflicts, turning a powerhouse figure into a generic coming-of-age trope. Part 2. The Wolverine Dilemma. The generational divide. The most glaring structural flaw in this casting direction is the relationship between the core team and Logan. Retaining Hugh Jackman, or skewing Wolverine toward a seasoned mid-50s veteran, while placing him alongside a 20-something Scott Summers, completely breaks the iconic central dynamic. The tension between Cyclops and Wolverine only works when they are ideological equals. Rivals, not mentors. The clash between Logan and Scott is rooted in mutual grudging respect between two grown men who approach violence, morality, and survival from opposite extremes. When Jackman's Wolverine is twice the age of Connor's Cyclops, that ideological battle is reduced to an older, experienced warrior talking down to a kid who is out of his depth. The undermining of Scott's authority. Cyclops needs to be able to look Wolverine in the eye, give an order, and have Logan obey it, even if he grumbles the entire time. A seasoned, veteran Wolverine will never believably take tactical orders from an inexperienced field leader half his age, without it looking patronizing. The romance dynamic. The Scott-Jean-Logan dynamic becomes untenable. The romantic tension between Logan and Jean only functions when all three characters exist in the same generational bracket. Expanding the age gap shifts the dynamic from a compelling narrative rivalry into an awkward, unbalanced distraction on screen. By leaning on legacy casting for Wolverine, while skewing the rest of the primary X-Men roster younger,
the studio creates an ensemble that cannot interact with the narrative parity the source material demands.
Part 3. The supporting roster. Abbott, Weaving, Navarrete, and Boyd. The dissonance extends beyond the main trio into the supporting cast. Looking at the wider ensemble announced at D23, the generational scrambling becomes even more apparent. Christopher Abbott as Professor X. Abbott is a phenomenal actor, but casting a man in his late 30s as Charles Xavier drastically alters the patriarch dynamic of the team. Instead of an elder statesman guiding his seasoned operatives, we have a relatively young Xavier leading a team of teenagers, making the entire setup feel more like a prep school than a paramilitary strike force. Samara Weaving as Emma Frost. Weaving is arguably a great fit for the White Queen. However, Emma Frost's most compelling comic book arcs involve her fierce rivalry with Jean and her eventual romantic and tactical partnership with Scott. If Scott is played by the much younger Kit Connor, that critical adult dynamic with Weaving is completely severed. Inde Navarrete as Rogue and Maya Boyd as Storm. Bringing in Navarrete and Boyd reinforces that Marvel is building from the ground up. But Storm is often depicted as an experienced goddess and secondary leader, while Rogue's tragic powers require profound emotional maturity to portray correctly. Aging them down threatens to reduce their rich, complex lore to standard teen angst. Part 4. The Outlier. Why Adam Driver as Mr. Sinister works. Amid an ensemble that struggles with balance, the announcement of Adam Driver as Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister, stands as an inspired, brilliant piece of casting. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notoriously difficult comic book villains to translate into live action. He is a Victorian geneticist obsessed with mutant bloodlines, possessing a theatrical, gothic flamboyance paired with chilling clinical sociopathy. In the wrong hands, the character risks devolving into unintentional parody. Adam Driver is one of the few contemporary actors with the exact skill set required to balance these two opposing tones. Theatrical presence. Driver possesses a classical, imposing theatrical background. He understands how to deliver heightened, grandiose dialogue without losing underlying psychological menace. Cold obsession. Through roles spanning dramatic cinema to high-concept franchises, Driver has demonstrated an exceptional ability to portray quiet, obsessive ambition. His Nathaniel Essex would bring a genuine, unsettling intensity to Sinister's fixation on the Summers and Grey genetics. A true physical and intellectual threat. Driver provides the gravitas needed for a multi-film archvillain, giving the mutant saga an overarching antagonist distinct from the well-trodden Magneto dynamic. Driver's casting proves that the creative team understands how to adapt complex personas. It simply highlights how disjointed the heroic side of the roster feels by comparison. Conclusion. The lesson of history and reserving judgment. Critiquing a casting announcement on paper is a time-honored tradition in comic book cinema, and historical precedent reminds us why patience is critical. In 2000, fans pushed back heavily when a tall, relatively unknown Australian stage actor named Hugh Jackman was chosen to play the short, feral Wolverine. In 2008, the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark and Heath Ledger as the Joker was met with intense skepticism across online forums. Casting announcements exist in a vacuum of text and headshots, divorced from script, tone, cinematography, and on-screen